Outer Space, episode 119. Joining me, as he often does, Dylan McCandless, Super DM64.
Hi.
Dylan, today we're going to be talking about another book because we're nerds and we like to read things. Although I listen to this as an audiobook, so I'm less of a nerd than you are. But what book did you read that I listened to?
Yes, well, the book that I read like an adult, well, you had it read to you like a bedtime story, is War for the Planet of the Apes, Revelations, the prequel novel to War for the Planet of the Apes. Although you could also call it a sequel novel to Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. I suppose in betweenquel is the best phraseology.
It's about apes, you know. Some of
They
them
have a
talk.
War for a planet. It's
Yeah, it's very complicated, but also quite simple and easy to get into and easy to get engrossed in. But yeah, so this is set in between Dawn and War, but as you said, it's more closely set right after War. I'm sorry, right after Dawn. Excuse me. And because of that, feels more like a direct sequel to that than a direct prequel to War. Although, that being said, a lot of what happens is there to set up stuff for War. However, I feel like there could be another book in between Dawn and War after this. Would you agree with that?
I definitely think there could be. In fact, I kind of want one.
Yeah, I doubt we'll get it.
I doubt we will, but there's no more they could do. It's wide open, really.
Yeah. So, needless to say, I think you like this.
Oh yeah, I liked it quite a bit.
Yeah, no, I did too, and I did sound like I didn't expect. It sounded like I expected not to, but this kind of stuff usually, like, it's always really hit or miss with me. Like this prequel to movies tie-in novel, because it always depends on how it's written, what the intention is, and who the fuck wrote it. Sometimes they're very rushed. Sometimes they're based on like the very early screenplay, and they don't really line up with the movie, and that makes it like feel contradictory and less good. All kinds of problems can crop up. But what we have here, as we've mentioned in previous episodes, was written by one of the guys who worked on one of the better stories in Tales from the Forbidden Zone. Greg Keyes. He wrote Stone Monkey, which is one of the more unique and interesting stories in that book that, you know, tells us some stuff about the Planet of the Apes universe that we didn't know before, while still feeling very in line with that universe. And I think what we have here in Revelations is we have a story that realizes that it has to tell us how certain characters got to certain places in the movie that we've either seen already or are going to see, while also telling us more directly what they did right after the stuff we've already seen them do in the previous movie. And I think what he does in addition to that is he creates this richer tapestry for what's going on around that to tell us stuff about what's going on around those major events that we didn't know already. And it's all mixed together in an interesting and balanced way that makes this a well-paced and consistently engaging and very interesting read. And also, just all in all, and this is the biggest endorsement, it's a fucking great Planet of the Apes book, and that's the really big thumbs-up statement.
Yeah, it is, and that's good to see, because we don't get a whole lot of Planet of the Apes prose fiction like we do with another franchise.
We've reviewed most of it.
Indeed, like you do with say, a Star War or
a Star War.
Even like AVP has tons of books out there.
Yeah,
you know,
both the Alien and Predator have several ongoing, well, not ongoing, but they have several different series of solo novels as well. I've read some of them. Most of them are just kind of okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other experience where I was like, anything that's based on a movie that gets turned into a book is sometimes just super generic, you know?
Yeah. But you don't get as much of it with Planet of the Apes, which is you know, it's sad because they did the whole big franchise thing before even the Star Wars.
And it's such a no-brainer too. Like just like Star Wars is. It's a no-brainer to expand out the story.
There's so much interesting things to be explained. However, what we do have and again, like you said, we've reviewed most of it at this point, tends to be really fucking good. And,
Yes.
and that's I'll take the quality over the quantity
And isn't that the
anytime.
experience with Planet of the Apes in general? Like, it's not a franchise that, I mean, it used to be a franchise that was constantly cropping up, but it's not a franchise that since then, since its original run, has constantly cropped up. But whenever it does, it's always interesting and always usually pretty good, or at least interesting in the case of Tim Burton's movie. But everything after that has always been has always been solid, you know? So I think that there's this respect and admiration for the series that always inspires creativity and a desire to make something that stands out and says something as well. Because Planet of the Apes is also not one of those sci-fi franchises where you can rely on the action, you know?
No.
Like that's probably the biggest problem with Tim Burton's movie is that at a certain point that's all it is it's just all it's all fighting. But the best Planet of the Apes movies, the action, like you could cut out the action and it would still largely be entertaining. Although when that happens, it's usually fucking great. So I think that's a testament to the franchise in general. This particular book, though, I think what it told me was there's a lot about this version of the universe that I didn't know that I probably should have, or at least I should have wondered about. You know?
Yeah.
Particularly,
I'm sure a lot of it was set up in Firestorm, which we still have to read and review.
Both of us have purchased it. I don't have my copy with me yet. It's on its way from Amazon. You have it. We're all going to read it in our own due time, and then once we do, we'll plan out when we're going to review that. So that'll be likely sooner rather than later, but we both have to read it. And this is something I'm going to have to read physically, not listen to. I can blow through audiobooks a lot more quickly than I can physical novels. Although, if I focus on that, maybe not. We'll see. It shouldn't take me long.
For me, it just depends on how much time I have. If I have the time and inclination, I can fucking go through a fucking book like nobody's business. But a lot of times, it's a little bit here and there, and it can stretch out for much longer than intended. So, and I'm reading The Shining first, which is a very long book. Not as long as it was, but pretty long. So
I've been reading
that'll lead up.
I'm reading every single Pendergast novel, so I was in the midst of one when we decided to talk about the other Planet of the Apes prequel novel, and I'm going to finish that. And if I don't have the book by the time I finish it, I will get another Pendergast novel, read that, and then I will, or listen to it rather, and then I will read Firestorm. I got another book as well that I'm going to try out for DFOS, so I will also read that sooner rather than later and tell you how it is, and we can talk about maybe doing it on the show, because it's certainly something that we're both into and will definitely be fitting of upcoming topics. So regardless of all of that, why don't we get more into details on Revelations here? Although one more general thing, this is something we both talked about in prior conversations. The title is a little ridiculous, right?
Yeah, I kind of wish these prequel novels didn't feel the need rather to use the exact name of the movie they're prequeling. I get why it's done. It's to make that connection in people's heads when they see it on their on the bookshelf at Walmart or whatever. But War for the Planet of the Apes : Revelations is just a lot. You could have just called it Planet of the Apes Revelations. I think people could have figured out that it takes.
Because I think Revelations absolutely works given the story. Because the whole thing is about people and apes realizing things that they did not know before.
Yeah, I don't think your target audience for this needs you to spell out that the book takes place in between the two movies. I mean, Planet of the Apes, as we've been discussing, is kind of known for being a thinking man science fiction. I think we would have gotten it, but whatever.
Also, who's going to read this outside of people who know what the fuck this is,
Right, exactly.
So I don't think that's a problem. And you can say it's like Star Wars puts on on the book it'll say Journey to the Force Awakens, Journey to the Last Jedi, whatever. It'll tell you it's a prequel to the movie. It just doesn't feel the need to call itself that. So you can say prequel to War for the Planet of the Apes, but just call it Planet of the Apes Revelations.
Yeah, you could have called it Planet of the Apes Revelations, and then at the bottom of the book cover in different font, the thrilling prequel to the upcoming War for the Planet of the Apes, or whatever,
Yeah, because that is still a lot to put on the covers.
1 in 5.
Yes, absolutely.
And another thing about the cover of this book that I didn't even think to criticize until I got my copy of Firestorm, man, the cover is like really generic and simple. Like it's just a shot of Caesar from the movie.
I
And
actually
Firestorm
think
has,
it's. I think, and I don't even think it's from War. I think it's from Dawn, and they photoshopped him to look grayer, like he is in War.
yeah,
It's not good at all. I don't know. I don't even know if I'm going to use it as the thumbnail for the video because it's so bad.
I didn't realize it was so basic until I got my copy of Firestorm because that has a beautiful cover.
Yeah, it's a lot better.
It's all artistic and shit.
Which ape is that on the cover though? Is that Caesar?
I'm not sure. I'd have to.
It's kind of hard to tell because of the style, because of how stylized it is. It's definitely not Koba.
Yeah,
You could tell if it was Koba.
Yeah, he's got that freaky bonobo thing going on.
Well, he's also got the scars and the mean snarl, so that's easy to tell. But it looks like it could be Blue Eyes or, maybe some other ape or even just a generic ape.
It's actually something I learned from reading this book that we're about to review. Apparently, Kobo was supposed to be a bonobo this entire time. I thought he was just another chimp.
Yeah, well, I didn't really think about making distinctions. I mean, because bonobos are a brand, they're related to chimpanzees more closely than they are orangutans or gorillas, obviously. So,
I didn't even think to make a distinction just because, classic Planet of the Apes never had bonobos. So
yeah.
I just always assumed
They
it's a
simply
chimp.
made that distinction because bonobos are probably used a lot in labs.
Probably, yeah.
And that was Koba's whole arc.
I wonder
Probably
if that
because
was,
they're the closest to humans, right? Like that's the whole deal.
Yeah. I wonder if there's like a line in Rise that I'm forgetting where somebody says, "Oh, this bonobo over here," or something. You know what I mean? I don't know.
I don't think so. They refer to him as a chimp, which bonobos, again, they technically are chimps.
Yeah.
They're just their own thing. Because there's another bonobo in War that stands out. It's the one that distracts the human guard, and then the other, I think it's Rocket, throws his shit at the guard.
Yeah. They're a particular type of chimp, but they are chimps.
You know what else? I know this is random. We'll get into the book in a second. I have notes that we can go through.
What is Bad Ape? Is it a really ugly chimp?
No, he's a chimp. He's just a normal chimp. But
is he younger because he's so small compared to like?
No, he has to be. He has to be at least Caesar's age because he's got to be younger than that actually. So maybe maybe a little older than Blue Eyes.
He looks smaller than Blue Eyes though.
That doesn't matter. He could just be smaller genetics. I don't know. Anyway,
I guess.
Because I only say that because he mentions having children in the movie.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you're right. He's an older. He's just a short man, I guess.
Yeah, I mean there are short people, so there could presumably be short chimps. Anyway, point being, in War, one problem with the ending is that we got a great wrap up for Caesar and definitely for Maurice and Nova and even Bad Ape. But one thing I can never remember is if Rocket is still alive at the end. Because I remember you asked me about that at one point, and I saw the movie again, and I forgot to try and pay attention, and I still can't remember if Rocket made it out of the movie alive.
I'm pretty sure he is.
I think so.
Because the last time I remember seeing him is when he gets himself captured, and then they all break out. He's the one that isn't he the one that throws his shit at that guard?
Yes, but I'm saying I don't know if we see him after that, because when they get to the location of Ape City from the original movie, at the end, we don't get a send-off for him. At least I don't remember him appearing in the shots, and if he does, he kind of blends into the background. We see Bad Ape, we see Nova, and again, obviously we see Caesar and Maurice, but I don't remember what happens to Rocket.
That's unfortunate because they make a bigger deal out of Rocket in this book, and I would presume Firestorm, than they really even do in the movies. We get a much better sense of he's maintained a high-level position in Caesar's government.
Well, he's like Caesar's right-hand man, even maybe more so than Koba was.
Whereas in the movies, it always just feels like, oh, there's that one chimp that Caesar had the short rivalry with, and it's not really explained that he has that.
And then he's just a friend of Caesar's. But in War, he definitely has a bigger role, and he plays up more of that, loyalty and responsibility to help Caesar.
Yeah.
Obviously, he goes with Caesar's son to find the new home that they go to at the end. There's something that happens in this book as well. So I figure let's get into the book proper. So the way I want to do this, because it's not a super long book, but there's a lot of characters and a lot happens in it. It's very similar to a Star Wars EU novel, where they take a lot of characters you know from the movies, they throw them all over the place, separate them, and then they mix them with a bunch of new characters. And that makes it kind of complicated to talk about it without kind of talking about other stuff that you might want to talk about later in a structured review. So talking about the characters is the way to go here. So why don't we start with returning characters from the movies? So meaning characters that appeared in both in all three, Rise, Dawn, or War. And then we'll get into characters that are exclusive to the book after that. That sound good?
Yeah, well, you've got Caesar, obviously.
Caesar is my first one on here, so let's start with him. So, the thing is, we get more of him than I actually expected. Because when I first got this, I was like, you know what, because Caesar is such the focal point of War, and, you know, usually he's our POV anyway, although he wasn't so much in Dawn.
We've talked about this. Rise was like half Caesar's movie and half James Franco's movie. War is pretty much exclusively Caesar's movie, but Dawn was very much a team effort. What do you call it?
Ensemble movie.
Well, that's the word I was looking for. Ensemble. Dawn was much more of an ensemble, and this book, taking place right after Dawn, is very much in that vein. We cut around to a lot of characters.
Yeah, again, it's like an EU novel in Star Wars. It jumps all over the place to tell us different things that are going on in the world that are important to each other because they all indirectly affect each other. Which is the cool thing in a story like this, to see how, like, you know, somebody says something over the radio in the South, and then it's reflected up north, and then all of a sudden everybody's going to try and kill each other. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of good stuff in this like that. So Caesar, though, what I mean,
geography book, and I can't vet any of it because I don't know how it works.
Yeah, I've only been there once, and I drove for a very little amount of time, so I don't really have a sense of direction there. But anyway, so about Caesar, you know, the whole book, he is up on a perch, commanding this assault, or he's not an assault. It's this defense of San Francisco against the oncoming forces of McCullough and the army from up north, who the humans that Koba attacked on called at the end. And what did you think about that as a starting place? Because that's obviously something that this book puts forward as an original idea. We didn't know that's what Caesar did afterwards when we get to War. So did you like, or did you think that was a dumb move?
I mean, I like that. I like that a lot. That's mostly what I was expecting to get out of this book. Honestly, was a lot of set up for war, a lot of Caesar, the beginnings of the war between Caesar and McCullough. And then I also expected, because I had read the back cover of the book before even buying it, I knew that there was going to be some intrigue involving apes who had been loyal to Koba. So those were the two things I expected to get out of this book.
There's a lot more to it, though.
Exactly. There's a whole other third plot that I did not see coming at all.
Yeah, and the third plot is probably A, my favorite, and then B, it's also probably the most prominent. But we'll get into that when we get into the new characters. So again, we're returning characters for the moment. So the setup, Caesar's side of this, I do think makes sense because he got. What I like about this is he got totally fucked over by Koba, and he is trying to make the absolute best out of it. And I think by and large he's behaving rationally about it. And I think that's the other good thing about this book, is all the characters behave very rationally, which is in line with the movies. And, you know, except for the characters who are supposed to not behave rationally, and they don't for a reason that enhances the themes of their character arc, like McCullough, for instance. But Caesar mostly behaves rationally in his attempt to defend the place where Koba forced all their people to go at the end of the last movie. and defend that as a strong point. And what Caesar is trying to prove to the humans now is that, yes, we are, yes, we've pronounced ourselves as a potential enemy, but we are also not to be, exterminated. We are not this nuisance. We are a force to be reckoned with on our own. And that's what he has to prove in this book. And the merit of proving that is the question that I think a lot of our characters are asking, like a lot of the new characters, a lot of the returning characters, they're all asking if Caesar should be even trying to do that. And then, on the human side of things, we have McCullough doing the same thing. So I think all of that works really well on Caesar's side, because that's a side of it that we only get in war, in the sense that McCullough has driven Caesar to this primal place of rage and fury. But we get a nice glimpse of the more grander scheme of that in this book.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what else did you want to say about Caesar?
Also, about Caesar specifically. It's very in line with where he was in Dawn and where he was going. Or I think the guy who wrote this did a good job of capturing what I always figured would be, going on. It seems it's very much in line. It feels natural with the events before and after.
I think one of my other favorite parts of it was him realizing the extent of human military might, because clearly he had underestimated them. To the extent that McCullough underestimates him, which is really interesting.
When we talked about the movie, I was talking about how apes simply wouldn't win this conflict because they're outgunned. But this book presented another disadvantage they had, which I didn't even think of. It's not only a matter of them being outgunned; they don't even comprehend the guns that they're being outgunned by.
Right.
It's not just that the humans have more technology; the apes don't even have a concept of what this technology can really do. And then there's a great scene in the book where McCullough uses a missile to destroy a building where he thinks the apes are hiding out in, and it's absolutely devastating. And they have no idea what just happened, honestly.
Right.
And Caesar comes to this realization, like, we're like way more fucked than I ever even thought we were.
Right. Which is also good foreshadowing, because we know that a lot of the apes don't think that Caesar is capable of protecting them anymore, and we know that a lot of them have turned over to the humans for that reason. Like in the movie, we have Red and Winter and a couple of other apes who turn code, and all those characters are in this book, although they're all still on the ape side of things at this point. Red doesn't turn over until like the very end, and even then you don't see him do it, which is unfortunate. I wanted to see that, but I guess it's not really necessary.
I was glad that we got a name for him, because in the movies they never told us what his name was.
Because the point was his name didn't matter. He had kind of abandoned his right to have a name. He was just this slave.
Now we know that his name is Red, and I'm sure he has a son named Eric. But
I liked. No, I'll save that for a little later. So. Why don't we move on to the next character on my list? Let's talk about Malcolm, a returning character from Dawn, like one of the only ones.
This surprised me a lot.
It surprised me a lot too. I don't know how I feel about this. I think it ultimately works, but I think it does not make sense with the end of the movie.
Yeah,
quite simply. That's simply the only thing.
The thing about the book that took me by surprise, especially when I read the very first chapters, was it was a lot closer chronologically to Dawn than I was even expecting. Like, this starts up right after Dawn. Like, the end credits of Dawn end, and then you pick up this book. It's that
Caesar,
close.
like runs down the hall after Malcolm and is like, hey, wait. I need you to tell me how human guns work.
Come back here, Morty. It's interesting. And so Malcolm hangs around for a little bit early on in this book, and that I wasn't expecting that. I'm not opposed to it. I mean, I like Malcolm.
The case is that Caesar needs Malcolm to work, to give him strategies for how to overcome the human. And also, at a certain point, Caesar makes it clear, like, you're a prisoner. Like, you're a glorified prisoner, but you are a prisoner. In the sense that, you were at the mercy of me and my apes.
I like the idea of it, because it makes sense in that way.
That idea, though, is a little conflicting with the ending of Dawn. Like, Caesar, like, puts his face to Malcolm's, like, at the end of Dawn. Like, they have a very intimate moment, and then all of a sudden Caesar's like, you're my prisoner now.
Yeah, well, he kind of has to.
Yeah, well, in this book, it makes perfect sense. But, again, it does not line up with the ending of the movie, and you just kind of have to deal with that.
Well, that's ultimately the problem with it. The whole thing is that it doesn't line up with the end of the movie. I'm not opposed to the idea of Malcolm staying around, but I thought the idea to sending him away at the end might have even been a misstep, because I wanted him to stick around and be the McDonald of this franchise. But
it would have been nice to have a returning human from Dawn, but the way this franchise seems to go is like, if they're off screen, they're dead. That's the assumption you have to make. Although maybe not so, given what we see in this. That they could just be off at some other community somewhere, just living.
So I like the idea of Malcolm sticking around. It's just that it doesn't quite match up with Dawn, and that's really the only thing about this book that makes it kind of shaky, like continuity-wise.
That's probably the biggest problem with it, is Malcolm's inclusion, and the fact that it makes zero sense with the end of the movie. Because there's other good stuff that they do with him and his family after that, when Rocket and Blue Eyes are going on their journey, and they escort them out of San Francisco to go off to wherever they're going to go live their lives. And they end up going to the ape sanctuary where Caesar started the revolution. And that's a great bit.
That was one of my favorite things in the book. Again, another thing that I wasn't expecting going in that really took me by surprise was seeing the location again.
Well, I just like tying all three movies together like that, because, obviously Dawn is the one that everybody talks about. Like, that's the big one. But every now and then we sneak in a nice big reference to something that happened in Rise, like the bridge assault or Genesis or anything like that. So I always like those references, and that's the big one that I just loved. Because it's also like you get to see Malcolm in a location from the previous movie. I guess we also kind of got that in the movie with when he goes to Rodman's house.
The Hoops?
Yeah, the Hoops. But as to what happens there, pretty much, what do they realize something when they go there? What was it? They learn something.
Well, Blue Eyes is surprised to see that it's above ground. Based on the stories that had been told to him, he always imagined it to be like underground or something.
Because it's called the Underplace, right?
Yeah, a whole lot of that chapter consisted of Blue Eyes being surprised.
It's Blue Eyes' point of view.
Yeah, it was all about him being surprised as to what these things actually looked like, because they didn't quite match up with what he had imagined when he had been told the stories, which was all great shit. But the other big thing that happens is that's when they first come in under fire by mysterious entities who are revealed later on. That's right.
See, that's the bit I forgot about. Okay, and it's not. And they think it's humans at first. Malcolm thinks it's humans. And again, Malcolm the whole time is desperately trying to facilitate the best thing for his family, as well as for the apes, and as well as for people in general. Like, at first he tells everybody from their colony to leave, because it's the apes territory now. It's all been fucked up. It's the apes territory now. And a lot of them don't listen, and Malcolm is like, let me talk to them. I'll tell them to go. And Caesar's like, no, that's done. They've made their choice. And they end up going and joining McCullough's forces, and then they become part of the army. Some of them do.
Yeah.
Because McCullough doesn't like most of them, because he thinks that they're just like fucking crazy, fucking woozy, fucking suburb.
Well, they don't have any experience really with this kind of thing. They're just who have sort of been forced into this role by Copa's attack, and he has reason, and we'll talk about this when we get to McCullough, because there's tons of fun shit to talk about there.
He's a heavy package to unload.
He has reason to be suspicious of survivors, let's just say.
Right. All right, so let's talk about the next character on my list, just to keep this going. Let's talk about Maurice. He doesn't get a lot in this, which I was a little disappointed by. However, he gets a lot to do in war. I think that that's fine. Same thing with Caesar. Like he and it's war is kind of he, Caesar, and Bad Apes movie. Like they're the three big pillars of that story.
Yeah.
And in this, he mostly just serves to be Caesar's voice of reason. You know, Luca is Caesar's voice of strength, and then and Maurice is the one who's like, "Hey man, let's chill. You know, like let's think about this for a second before we decide to throw all our apes at this one point on the bridge." And I like that they had to defend the bridge again. That was a nice callback to Rise.
And that's always great for Maurice, because that's very in line with what he is in the movies, and that's what his character's always been good at, you know.
And I do like that in
Rise, where he has, you know, no dialogue, obviously, because he's still just an orangutan. As soon as he enters the movie, you can tell that that's what he's going to be. Like, he has such a calming, you know, energy about him, I guess. You know, there's just something about him. And as a classic Apes fan, I pretty much was like, "Oh, there's your Virgil. There's your Virgil right there." So that
right.
That didn't hurt matters either.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot to say about him, but he gets a lot to do in the movie, so I guess that's ultimately fine. So let's keep it moving then. Rocket. We talked about him a little bit already. Great in this book.
He is. The really great thing about Rocket in this book is that he, as well as Blue Eyes, as well as really the entire society, is still reeling from what Koba did. And him and those two characters in particular, with the death of Ash in Dawn.
We can talk about Rocket and Blue Eyes as a pair if you want, because I have them down together here. So, but
yeah, they spend the majority of the book together,
which is great because Caesar puts Blue Eyes in charge, because Caesar is kind of ultimately preparing his son for the virtue of one day taking over. Which is
right.
With this war, Caesar thinks is an ever-growing possibility, which is probably why he sends him on this journey. Although in reality, Caesar sends him on the journey for two purposes. Practically, to actually figure out what the hell is down south, see if there's more humans down there, you know, whatever, some place they can go to retreat from the humans, anything that's useful information to them. But the other more kind of fatherly purpose is Blue Eyes and Rocket are both reeling from the death of Ash, Rocket's son, Blue Eyes' best friend, killed by Koba in Dawn. We saw that happen.
Not to mention, Caesar wants to minimize the chance of Blue Eyes getting killed in the battle that he.
That's right. Isn't that interesting, given what McCullough does?
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that to him, but I really liked that Blue Eyes and Caesar have another thing to kind of knock heads over, but they don't really. They don't get the chance to, because there's too much going on, and Cornelia has to be like, you know, listen, I know you got to remember he's got a lot on his plate, and he's just trying to do what he thinks is right for you. So just listen to him and stop being a pussy. But we'll get to Cornelia as well. But one other thing I really liked about Rocket is that there's this idea that's kind of carried throughout, that he is not as creatively intelligent as a lot of the other apes, like a Caesar, a Maurice, a Koba, a Blue Eyes, but he's more practically wise. He's got more street smarts, I guess is the way to break it down. You know, he's got more common sense. He's a better survivor. He's a better fighter. He's better kind of out, doing work and he's more reliable in a pinch, quicker on his feet.
He has a very particular set of skills.
Right, he's the Liam Neeson of the apes. And I really liked that. I thought that was great. There was another bit later where his mate is reflecting to Cornelia about the fact that in Rise, when Caesar I cannot remember, but when Caesar dominated the troop, she expected him to try, to take her as his mate, but he never did. And she was happy because she wanted to stay with Rocket because Rocket was hers and she cared him. And it's because he has this very endearing but very iconic and reliable personality. And I think that this book, maybe more so than any of the movies, outlines that, and I will always have more of an appreciation for him because of it.
That's a great moment because, well, this happens a lot throughout Cornelia's sections of the book, and we'll talk about her soon, I think. You get some reflection from her because she was, captured in the wild as a child. We get some reflection from her and from that other female chimp in that scene you were just talking about like the way their society worked pre-Caesar, pre the Awakening, which is not something that really you get much in apes stuff. Caesar didn't realize that the normal thing that a chimp would do when he took over the tribe would be to take the former alpha's mate. Like, he wouldn't have even known that.
No.
And then Cornelia says as much, like, oh, I don't think he even, realized that he could have. And that's great. That's good shit. There's another moment, a different moment where Cornelia is thinking about, how they used to go foraging and shit before she was captured. The differences between what that was like and what their new society is like. That's great that we got some of that from the older apes in the book, because there's a divide in here between the older apes who lived through the revolution in Rise and the newer generation of apes like Blue Eyes who has only ever heard about this shit through stories.
I really liked all of that shit, and I think that's another good reason to pair up Rocket and Blue Eyes, is that you have that distinction between the older generation who was around during the revolution and the one who was born after. Sorry, I was a little distracted. There was some wild shit going on outside that was distracting me and my cats. Anyway, so I think that was another good reason to pair them up, and that was another good reason why they should have gone back to the ape sanctuary, was to give Blue Eyes a sense of not only what their past was really like, but again, a grander scope of what the real world is like, and Caesar thinks that's important, and obviously it's good for him to go through that, but man, all the stuff they did with those two characters was really effective. I think that with Blue Eyes, the interesting thing, going back to this book, is that he ends up, dead at the beginning of the movie. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it. But I think that leaves him in this place of, they could have just done nothing with him here, and you would think that it wouldn't have mattered because he dies in the next movie, so why would you set up him? But he goes through this very interesting arc that sets him up where he could have gone off and done any number of things in the universe following had he survived through war and done a million other things after. But
and I'm glad to get that, because he's a character who had a lot of potential.
Right, it makes the tragedy of the movie more solid.
When he dies out of nowhere in war, there's a part of you that thinks, oh, I really wanted to see what that guy was going to go on to do.
Right.
Now it's all on Cornelius' shoulders, but
I wanted to see him take over or whatever,
or something, or maybe even be one of those royal family types who decides to abdicate, or something. I don't know. There was a million different things he could have done, and he just sort of gets murdered.
He could have deserted anything.
Yeah, you think, oh, that's kind of a waste. But then this book gives him a story. So then, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. If you like these films, I would recommend reading this book. So go read it, everybody.
I would absolutely say so. And I would also say, if you haven't seen War and you're watching this video, you're not a smart man or woman or ape.
Support more Planet of the Apes ancillary fiction so that maybe we can get more. Like the Star War.
The Star War. But, next character, if you have nothing else to add.
No.
Cornelia. Man, this is like Rocket, this is the absolute best that she's ever gotten.
Yes, she gets to do things in this movie.
She does things!
She was supposed to do things in the first movie, and if you're not aware, that all got cut out. Then in the second movie, she gave birth, so that's doing things. I'm not gonna discredit that. Or else we'll have some very angry keyboard kids. But
there you go, calling them that again.
But in this, I'm nothing if not consistent. But in this, she gets to do all kinds of things, and that's just great. Her legacy is no longer just, oh, she had a kid and then she got murdered. No, now she has this whole little side story that's very interesting, and I don't know how much we can talk about without getting into the shit with the Koba sympathizers.
We'll talk about all of that as it develops. I mean, what happens is a bunch of Koba sympathizers try to take over, and the way they try to do that is by getting control of all the females, while Caesar is waging war with all the males. And Cornelia is obviously in charge of the females, so they have to fuck with her in order to make that happen. So that's why she gets the spotlight. And some of the interesting things that we realize are that when they first established the colony, the males were not allowed to be present or even know where the females were giving birth. Which I think the idea there is because there were still some kind of there were still lingering, primal urges in some of the apes, and they might have tried to kill some of the children for competition or some genetic reasons or whatever.
Could be. It could also just be there's a similar thing that happens in human society. You go back to the 50s, and the man was never in there when the woman was giving birth. He would be pacing out in the waiting room. It could be something similar to that. They're developing similar sort of taboos, But yeah, that's all great. We get a lot of her shit consists of really good world building, and this book is full of great world building that really fleshes out this trilogy of films in ways that I couldn't have even imagined. And we get a lot of that with her. Again, like you were just saying, some information about what things were like when the colony first started. And also, we learned that Cornelia don't take no shit.
Oh yeah, she's a bold bitch, double B.
She's the fucking Sarah Connor of apes. At one point, she bites a gorilla's ear off or some shit.
Yeah, she fucks up one of Koba's sympathizers. Yeah,
it's badass shit.
Yeah, and then at the end, she stands up to a gun. It's all good stuff.
She is a strong, independent woman who don't need no man.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Caesar's not around for all this and has no idea what's going on. I don't get a bit of him really lamenting it.
No.
Which is unfortunate because, again, she goes through a lot of shit. You think he would have been like, what?
Yeah, everything gets wrapped up at the end kind of abruptly, and you just assume that they filled each other and what happened off screen.
That's another potential problem, is that things just kind of stop at a certain point. I mean, there is certainly a conclusion, but you wish the conclusion was drawn out a little more. It's sort of like the reverse of, Return of the King.
Yeah, well, this book is paced a lot like a movie, interesting enough. And I think that's a common thing among movie tie-in books, is that they're made to kind of try to feel like the movies. So, whereas in a normal novel, you would get all kinds of fleshing out of all these things. The book is just sort of and that's the climax. We're done.
Right, exactly. Yeah, a lot of books do that, which is frustrating. But a lot of them also they'll follow it up later, like this does with a movie. However, this is set 5 years before the next movie, so not really same idea. But anyway, so yeah, Cornelia is great. They actually develop her. It's awesome. Another character they give more development to, who is more of just a background character. Oh, not a background character, just we don't really know a lot about him in War. Is Red, the gorilla who turns to the human side in War. So he's one of Koba's sympathizers, and I
like him a lot more having now read the book, because in the movie he just felt he's like low rent Koba.
I got the idea of him more than I liked him.
Yeah.
Because he seemed to be giving Caesar a lot of shit for an ape who was helping to murder his own kind for no good reason.
Yeah.
That's ultimately the thing about his character in War that he realizes that makes his turn. He's ordered to reload as they're gunning down his own kind, and he's just like, what am I doing?
Well, you get a sense in the movie that what he's doing is really more personal than he's letting on, but you don't really know the details of that. And
you get you get that sense in this book as well. Is that it's not about the good of the apes; it's about his own sense of power and justice.
Yeah. Well, having now read the book, especially at the end when he has the meltdown and fights Gray, who's an original character that we'll talk about soon, I think. you understand now, like, why it's personal for him. You know, he starts out, you know, thinking, oh, we're doing what's best for the apes, but by the end of this book, it's totally fucking personal. Now now I have a feeling when I go back and watch War again, it's gonna be like he's bitter as shit, and I understand why.
Right. Well, yeah, I think what this book does a good job of doing is making him feel truly desperate for something or someone to grasp onto, some sense of purpose, and that's ultimately why he goes to McCullough.
Because all of the Koba sympathizers in this book are pretty well reasoned. I mean, they really believed in Koba's approach to things, and when they explain their position, you know,
it makes sense. Yeah,
you know,
especially you look at somebody like Fox, like what they go through, their view on life makes sense.
Yeah,
but we'll talk about that later. So, yeah, no, I think this book definitely enhances War in a big bad way for Red, because again they give him a name, but also it just makes his position in that movie make more sense, and his ultimate turn at the end more satisfying.
Yeah, I kind of wish it could have done favors for Winter. As it turns out, he was just always pretty pathetic.
He sucks giant cocks, doesn't he? Yeah, he's no good. He ends up being tricked by Red in this. He's not tricked by Red in War. He just more goes along with them. I guess that this was foreshadowing that. I wasn't as crazy about that, because I think that makes I think that only made Winter look, you know, way worse, which I guess was the idea, but I don't know if we needed that. If you had read this before you saw War, I think that would make the turn in War less satisfying for Winter, because that surprised me quite a bit when I saw the movie. Like I didn't expect that. When I saw that white ape in the trailer, I thought it was a fucking lawgiver. So when I saw the movie and it was just some bumblefuck gorilla, I didn't expect him to suddenly turn bad.
Yeah. Well, I think the idea was, I think he's very pathetic. He's a character who, you know, it's very easy to boss around, really. He gets himself in trouble for that, you know, being manipulated by the bad apes, both in this and in the movie. And I think psychologically that comes from the fact that he's albino. There's a little bit in the book where they're talking about how that makes him, like, you know, easier to spot, and then that's a problem, you know, and they talk about how that's like a survival issue for him, and how, like, as a kid, if they ever played hide and go seek, which, you know, for a human is just a fun game, but for an ape that's like a survival practice game.
He always lost.
There is a little bit of that in the book, and I think that was supposed to be the idea, but it's not pronounced enough, and he just comes out in the end like feeling like a total, like, just fucking weasel of a character who ultimately just has little on anything.
Mm-hmm. I would have to agree. So speaking of a character, though, that has a great effect on things, let's talk about the big bad McCullough.
Yes, okay, so one of the best parts of the movie, and also I think one of the best parts of the book, I fucking love McCullough's character.
Yeah, he's awesome.
And what I love about him...
I love him more given this book, because the movie, he's more of a presence until like halfway through, when we actually, you know, when we actually see him face to face. We don't see him for like 40 minutes or so.
What I loved about him in the movie was how much of just a stone cold, just fucking sociopath he was. And what I love about him in this book is that he's not that yet.
No, not at all. He is a well-reasoned military man.
And we don't see the incident that causes him to turn into that, although he explained that to us in the movie, so we know why he became that.
We didn't need to see that. That wouldn't have happened if this made sense.
Exactly. So we don't see the incident that turns him into the cold, unfeeling sociopath, but we get a portrait painted of who he was before that.
And we see his relationship with his son, which is probably the really crucial thing that set that psychotic break. And we see a lot of things about their relationship that lead to that break.
And we also realize over the course of the book that his attachment to his son is really his only weakness. And so when we see him in the movie and he's already lost his son, he doesn't have a fucking thing to lose. And that makes him so much scarier in retrospect.
Exactly. It makes him so much more dangerous, but also totally off the rails and lost and without a purpose, and wrong.
from the first time he appears in this book, it's great because we get tons of awesome world building. This time on the human side of things, we learn a lot about what those 10 years in between Rise and Dawn were like, and it's fucking hell, man. It's like all of the post-apocalyptic moves rolled into one. There's like crazy militias. There's crazy cultists who believe that the virus is like an act of God and they're spreading it intentionally. There's fucking cannibals.
The epicenter was Seattle.
Yeah, there's you always got to watch fucking. There's cannibalism. It's a fucking horrible world that he has spent 10 years clawing his way out of in some kind of an attempt to reestablish society, only to find that there's now these fucking apes that are in his way, and so he. That's when he comes to the conclusion, like, we got to get these fucking things, we got to fucking deal with them, we got to take them out.
I think one of the other really great things about him in this book that we don't really get a sense of in the movie is that at first he would and does underestimate them, because all he has is a radio transmission of a bunch of people going, we're being attacked by apes with guns. He doesn't know what the hell the extent of their civilization is and Caesar and all that. He also probably has an idea of the bridge attack. They get into that later on in the book. But he doesn't put... I don't think he puts two and two together that these are hyper-intelligent apes until he sees them in action, which is
at one point they talk
realization.
I think at one point they talk about how he had seen footage of the incident at the end of Rise before.
He talks about not being impressed with them. Like it was mostly the fact that the humans themselves were more, at fault for putting up a measly response and being so surprised.
And honestly, at that point in the ape's development, he's not wrong.
Yeah, that's the thing. His assessment of the situation is not inaccurate. And also, you really get the sense that he's absolutely going to win, or at least he should. Given how much not like he should on the moral ground. I'm saying like practically.
There's no doubt that if the virus mutated again the way we saw in War, there's no Planet of the Apes in this scenario.
No,
McCullough would have actually wiped them all out.
Well, but the other thing was that the other humans weren't going along with that, though.
No, but the thing that made them turn against him to the point where they were sending soldiers after him
it wasn't them going after the apes. It was him killing other people,
killing the infected. So in a world where that mutation never takes place, I think it's reasonable to assume that his superiors, while maybe not in full agreement with what he was doing, would just allow him to continue and just do what they were doing in this book, which was like, no, we're not going to send you any more supplies. You'll just have to fucking deal with it, bitch. And then he tries to look elsewhere for help.
Right. I liked all that a lot. And he was one of my favorite parts of it, and one of the things that drew me in, because we got more of a realistic personal glimpse of him than we do in the movie, where he's more of a strictly villain. We talked about this. He's a strictly villainous presence in the movie. He's strictly antagonistic. Not so much here. He
is the Culp of this version of the universe. He's the only character in 3 movies that reminds one of that level of villainy.
Mm-hmm.
Because even Culp in Battle for the Planet of the Apes is probably the most straight up villainous any villain was in any of those movies, to the point where he was like twirling his mustache.
Well, him and Aldo in that movie.
Well, yeah, the two of them. Not as much moral gray areas in that film.
No. Yeah. So why don't we start to get into the new characters then? Because this is where we start to get into the areas we discussed. Let's start with the really, really, really big one. Let's start with Ray. So,
yes, Ray,
orangutan.
Very, very interesting indeed. When he first pops up in the book, you don't think much of him, or at least I didn't.
He's one of the characters who could have been awful, but he's not. He's actually kind of the emotional core of the whole book, and it's great.
You reach a point in the book where he starts describing these dreams he's having, and suddenly I remember reading the book and thinking to myself, is he the lawgiver? But then there was a while in the book where I thought, he's not going to make it out of this book alive. He can't be the lawgiver. But he does. And the way they leave him at the end of the book, which I'm not going to spoil unless you want to, the way they leave him at the end,
we're ripping this thing apart. Let's totally spoil it.
Okay, well, we'll get to that in a minute then. But the way they leave him at the end of the book, I'm like 99.99% sure that he's the lawgiver now.
I'm convinced. He absolutely is supposed to be that character. The thing is, they don't set up that character at all in the movies. I imagine Greg Keyes was like, "That's a mistake. I'm going to do it here," and it's it's done in such a way where not only does it make perfect sense that he does not appear in the next movie, but he probably shouldn't. It makes more sense for him to go off and find himself and then come back later in the status quo we have at the end of War, and then I think that's when he'll truly be, you know, integral to what's going on and truly be his impact.
Yeah, my fantasy version of how it went down is that Greg Keyes gets the script for War, reads it, and then realizes, wow, they really went all three of these movies without setting up the lawgiver, and then he just fucking did it himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and did it in a way that not only lines up very well with what we know of the lawgiver from other expanded Planet of the Apes stuff, but it also just lines up well with this universe, like as a character in this universe. But he's also more
now, I don't think
he's very different from how you might perceive the lawgiver, given how Zaius talks about him and everything. But you always get the sense he's more like the lawgiver at the end of battle.
Yeah, that's true.
That's more of what I'm saying.
What I wonder is how close, again, assuming he's the lawgiver, which I'm pretty sure he is, how close are the laws that he writes to the stuff that we heard in the first movie? Because I don't buy him having as much of a negative view on humanity as the lawgiver is.
But he's still got meditation to go off and do.
True. But even then, and you know, he has some horrible shit done to him by humans in this book.
And he still comes out of it not wanting anyone else to die.
Well, in the midst of having these terrible things done to him by humans, he also forms pretty strong, friendly relationships with a couple of them. The girl and the interpreter guy,
Felice and Armand.
Yeah, Armand, especially at the end. Felice just sort of falls out of the book at a certain point, and then we never found out what happened to her.
Potentially for the better. We'll get to her. Ray is really great. So he gets captured by the at one point with another character named Fox. We might as well talk about them together because I don't really have a lot to say about Fox. Fox is a Koba sympathizer, and
he's young. He might be the youngest Koba sympathizer. He's like Blue Eyes and Ray and Ash's age.
And Fox was trying to kill Blue Eyes, Ray, and Rocket. He was one of the people who shot at them at the ape sanctuary. One of the apes, I should say. But what Ray comes together to learn is that, yeah, he could hate Fox and try to kill him, but that's totally counterproductive to what his real goal is: survival and getting out and going back to Caesar and trying to help him. And I think that Ray is the character in this who probably learns the most and goes through the most complete arc. Because everybody else kind of goes through pieces of one, you know?
You know, it's interesting, and I never thought about this before, but this is the case in both this franchise and the classic films. The most basic law that the apes have is ape shall not kill ape. And as it turns out, that law predates even the lawgiver in both versions of the universe. That's interesting. I didn't think about that until just now.
Right. And I guess Maurice, because in Dawn, I think a lot of us walked out going, "Well, Maurice is the lawgiver." No, clearly not. Maybe
Maurice is the ape. Turns out.
I guess Maurice is like the inspiration for him, because I imagine that Ray probably looks upon Maurice with great respect and admiration. He doesn't really talk about that though. I wish that was more of a through line. Ray talks about his dad who died, and he has a lot of dreams about him, and all his dreams are about communications with the dead, which I think is the thing that said to you and I, like, oh, lawgiver, because that's obviously like these apes' first foray into any kind of religious consideration, any kind of spiritual consideration, which is fascinating. Right. And I think that's one of the world building elements that it's one of those things you wouldn't have thought to think about when you're watching the movies, because it's so focused on like the moment to moment drama. You know, you don't have one where the apes can sit around and go, I wonder what happens when we die, you know? And I think that especially like immediately following the ending of Dawn, when a whole bunch of them died, that's good stuff to do.
Yeah, and they would definitely contemplate that, since they've just had this, you know, human levels of intelligence thrust upon them.
Right. The awakening, as they call it here.
Yeah, it might have been a nice touch if he had been somehow related to Maurice. You know, maybe not Maurice being his dad. He could have been like, I don't know, an uncle or something.
All I needed was Maurice being more of a direct role model or authority figure, or even just father figure to him, you know, like mentor figure. But that wasn't there at all. Especially since Maurice, regardless of the fact that he's not the name character of Lawgiver, he's definitely the inspiration for him, because he's the one who started the main laws that inspire a lot of what is retained in the scrolls, you know?
Yeah. Ape shall not kill Abe.
You know what I also just thought about? You know what else I just thought about? Ray going off to meditate at the end, separating himself from all the other apes as they go off to find a new place to go. I thought it was a mistake to not tell us how Caesar and all them found... Oh, no, they do, actually. Where they found the other place to live. But they do. Koba and Gray had found it. The rocky place that they end up in war.
Well, at the beginning of war, Blue Eyes and Rocket come back again from having gone.
No, I'm talking about the place that they are in at the beginning of war. That place, the fortress that they're in.
I don't think that is the place that Rocket and Koba and Gray discovered, though, because you got the feeling that was really far away, whereas in the movie it just feels like they went further into the forest and hid behind a waterfall.
Okay. So yeah, maybe they were referring to the desert at that point.
Or some other place. I mean, California is a big state.
Mm-hmm. Well, the idea at the end of war is that they're not in California. They can't... I guess they could possibly still be in California, but it looks like they crossed the Mojave Desert. And it ended up in Colorado or Arizona. And that's why they're in that like mountainous, foresty area where there's probably a lot of Bigfoot running around.
Maybe they're in Tijuana.
Maybe. So Ray might be my favorite part of the whole book.
Interesting.
Yeah, I really, really liked him. Him and McCullough were probably my two big things that I really walked away loving. Because you know what else I liked about him? He was like one of the more innocent characters as well. Like he wasn't like he didn't walk away super angry from everything. Everybody else was so angry and depressed. He was constantly trying to embetter himself around him. And I just think that was very endearing in the midst of everything else that was going on, you know?
Yeah, I can see that.
So let's talk about Gray, shall we? Another Koba sympathizer. But bigger than that, he was like Koba's right-hand man.
Yeah, he's the Rocket to Koba.
Right. And Gray's a chimp, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because I actually went through a lot of the book thinking he was a gorilla, and then when I got to the end and Red was talking about being bigger than him, I was like, oh, he's a chimp because Red's a gorilla, so all right. That makes sense now.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Gray... Red basically pulls Gray aside towards the beginning of the book and is like, listen, you are Alpha now. And he's like, what? I swore my allegiance to Caesar again, never to betray him again. He's like, nah, bro, you are Alpha now because Koba's dead. You're the second in command. You're Alpha now. I'm going to follow you. We're all going to follow you. And he's like, oh, I don't know if I like this. And then Red outlines this plan. We kind of talked about it before, to take all the females while Caesar's fighting and then take them into the woods someplace Caesar won't find them, while they're killing all or someplace Caesar and the humans can't find them while the humans kill Caesar. That's their plan.
I really wasn't expecting this book to turn into Lion King 2, Simba's Pride.
Yeah, it was a little bit like that, wasn't it?
But since we got there, I guess that's where we were.
And Gray, I really liked him because he's one of the characters who have more of a rational mindset. But he was also like closer almost to like a Winter, where he's very easily led as well, because he totally lets Red like take him for a ride.
Yeah,
and it's only at the very end he redeems himself. and then dies.
Yeah, horribly. Like,
Yeah.
holy shit.
Quite terribly. What exactly were the details of that again?
Red shoots him in the fucking face.
That's right. Right,
goes,
because they were having a more traditional ape fight, and Gray was actually doing well, despite the fact that Red is a bigger gorilla. And then Red picked up a gun and shot him.
Yeah, then Red pulled the old Lost World Jurassic Park maneuver. He said, "Hey, you." And Gray said, "Yes," and then he got shot in the face.
Right. Which is nice that he then went off and joined the human military, whose guns, those are. Foreshadowing. Anyway, I really liked Gray. I wish we had maybe a little more development for him.
Yeah.
I do like that he genuinely, honestly believes that Caesar is not fit to be in command anymore. Because he does.
Right.
He absolutely believes that
perspective-
Caesar is not fit to rule anymore. And he makes a compelling reason as to why. I mean, it's totally not... It's only accurate if you don't know anything about people. And which Gray doesn't really. So he's so led by the way Koba, painted humans.
Yeah, it's really dependent on having Koba's worldview of what humans are like. Interesting. Koba is more like the traditional lawgiver than Ray is. It's like the 68 lawgiver, the "do not let them breed in great numbers."
Right.
Kind of lawgiver.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. But he's a good character to thwart Caesar, and I think it's nice that we have a character for Red to conspire with. All in all, I just wish we got more for him. So next on my list, though, is somebody who...
It's nice to have a sympathetic villain in this book.
Yeah, you know what? That's another good thing as well, is that he's sort of like McCullough in that he's not a good person or a good character. He's got a lot... He's doing something that we can't condone, but we understand why, and we can sympathize with that.
He makes that choice, but we understand what led him to make that choice. And, you walk away thinking, that if you had been in his position, you might have made a similar choice.
Right. If you were an ape who knew nothing about people.
Exactly.
So let's talk about a human who doesn't know much about apes.
And while I am technically an ape, I don't know. I do know terribly a bit about people.
So, speaking of a person, John McCullough, Colonel McCullough's son, the character who was referred to in War. We never saw him. He's technically a new character because we didn't see him in War. And obviously in War he was a big deal because he was one of the early victims of the mutated plague, which turned people into primitive, mute, just wandering savages. And he was one of the first victims of that, and McCullough killed him because he couldn't bear to see his son like that, which is obviously the beginning of his psychotic break that leads him to try and exterminate the apes and also just wipe out anybody who has the plague still. So, I think in this book, what John being there served to do is, the first thing is it definitely gives McCullough a better sense of humanity. And is his only sense of humanity, which is important, like you said earlier. But also...
Right. And also his, one glaring weakness, because there's a moment in this book where McCullough could still win, but John was in danger, and so he makes the decision to pull out. And he could have totally killed all the apes right then. He could have totally killed all the apes right then and there at the climax of this book, but he doesn't, because there would have been a plea of his son dying. And, that's really, and that's foreshadowed all throughout the book. There's a moment where there's this great character named Forrest, who's not Forrest Gump. Her last name is Forrest.
I don't have her on here.
She loses her leg at one point during an ape ambush.
Yeah, one of the earlier ape attacks.
She's very close to McCullough, and she notes that John is his weakness, and she wonders whether he's aware of that or not.
Right.
And that is what winds up biting him in the ass at the end.
And their relationship and their dynamic when they're together is very interesting. They, John is in the hospital early on because he gets fucked up in an ape ambush, but then he's back in the field, and there's one very cool scene where he and his dad go off on like a recon mission together, and they come across a wall that says Alpha Omega, and that's where they start talking about the meaning of what they're doing and the idea of wiping out the apes and anybody who resists the idea of civilization. It's all very good stuff and outlines a lot of what we see in McCullough in the next movie. But what John is also good for is also giving us a glimpse of how McCullough was as a father. And there's this sense of pressure that he puts on John because his entire family is all military. They're just this cycling family of just military legends, as to it, he's the tip of a great spear.
And then I've known families like that. These are things that exist. There are just some families that just generation after generation, they do this crazy thing. It's very much like Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump, the scene where he talks about, and his daddy was in this war, and his great granddaddy was in this war.
Yep.
And on and on and on and on and on and on. Probably since the caveman days. It's just.
It's that John is hesitant about fulfilling that legacy. Yeah. He's clearly.
I don't know if it's hesitation. I feel like he's more than willing to fulfill the legacy. It's probably just a pressure
to fulfill it.
Yeah,
because there's also this idea of
it's capable of doing it even, and
right.
It could be a complex issue.
Right, because he also doesn't want to feel like he's getting special privilege just because he's McCullough's son, and he also feels like he also gets harder treatment because he's McCullough's son.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that, which is also nice, and again, it serves to paint a better picture of who McCullough is, and who the man is we see in the next movie, and all the humans in this are just more human than the husks of humanity we see in the next movie.
Right.
So that's all good.
They've been very worn down by the time the next movie happens, and this is the beginnings of that.
Speaking of people who's human, Armand, the translator who and we can also talk about the entire Southern Base staff at this point as well, all the people working at the nuclear reactor.
I guess it's not common knowledge among the apes that he learned sign language from a human. I guess they just all assume that he made it up, because when Ray finds out that there are people who know sign language, and really throws
he
them
freaks the fuck out. Well, all the people they encounter early on can't sign.
It's interesting because, well, I know you would just think that might have been part of the stories that Caesar had passed down. He probably should have. He should have made a bigger deal.
Told them, yeah.
He should have made a bigger deal of telling people how much James Franco taught him, and then maybe there would have been less Copa sympathizers.
That's exactly the thing. I don't know why he covered. I think he's probably ashamed, or at least he probably thinks that they won't view it well. It's only the inner circle that knows about his real relationship with humans, like Rocket, Maurice, Cornelia.
Maybe it's a similar idea to that one story from Tales from the Forbidden Zone. Maybe the idea is that he wants ape society to progress with as little input from humanity as possible, and so
which is sort of ridiculous. I mean, given that every turn he's advancing them to a human society.
Yeah. So maybe by not telling them that sign language was created by humans, it's supposed to make them think that it's their own thing and sort of give them, a sense of pride or something.
Anyway, so Armand, I loved him. I loved the scene where he drunkenly shows up to Blue Eyes and Rocket and is like, "I'm gonna help you get your friend out, because I'm so sick of all this dumb bullshit of people trying to kill each other and the apes." And at this point, this is something we didn't talk about, McCullough has called down to the Southern Base, which they've only just learned about being a thing, and requested that they send up some nerves that they have to use against the apes. In return for...
I was never really clear whether those people in the South actually were former military or if they had just adopted those titles.
That's a good point. It's hard to tell. Because they don't really send up any reinforcements. There's only 6 people on the boat. They make that clear. That's why the apes are able to take it over.
Also, was the place they were running called Diablo, or was one of the people supposed to be called Diablo?
That was the name of the place.
Okay, see, the first time in the book when they mentioned Diablo, I thought they were talking about a person. So
I thought they were talking about a gang, but no, there's another gang that's like nearby that's got like a Hispanic theme. That like
What's interesting
they were the ones that were kidnapping the apes. Oh no.
Yeah.
No, that's wrong. Diablo is the base.
What's the name of the...
They were the ones taking the apes as well. There was another like Hispanic themed gang that is mentioned, but they weren't taking apes. That was the military people trying to experiment on them to try and find a cure for the virus. But again, they stopped doing that after the virus stopped affecting people. They do it in this because they're getting transmissions from up north now about apes being enemies and trying to take over. And now they're seeing apes down south. So they're concerned about that. That's why they take Ray and Fox.
Previously, they were doing it because of all the hysteria surrounding the simian flu. That sort of died down now. See, but what basically happened is that in this post-apocalyptic world, there's all these militias and things that we mentioned before when we were talking about McCullough's backstory. And this Diablo is basically this community that has arisen to prominence in the area and sort of tried to establish their own little government, because at this point they don't even know if the U.S. government is still a thing, which apparently there is something of a U.S. government out there still operating. But anyway, they kind of function like the Roman Empire, basically. Like they have all these little communities in that area under their thumb, and they supply them with electricity from the nuclear reactor in exchange for, shit.
Yeah, well, they take people into their service. They took one of the other original characters, Felice's. She's the young girl. Her mother was drafted into the service, and she died. She was killed by nerve gas, in fact.
Right.
So she has a personal stake in that. But just to get back to Armand, since he's where we started, do you think that he's supposed to be sort of like a reference to Armando from Conquest? Because he's an ape sympathizer.
That is sure who I was picturing.
Yeah, so I was sympathizing that. I was imagining that, I meant to say.
The entire time I was reading his character, I pictured Ricardo Montalban. Except for some reason I kept picturing with a ponytail. I don't know if that was even said in the book that the character was supposed to have a
yes.
ponytail. Okay, because I kept picturing Armando, but with a ponytail. But,
I just loved the bit where he came in and he started having this conversation with Ray, and he and Ray were like getting along really well, and the humans were like ordering him to keep it like, curt and interrogatory,
Yeah.
And I thought that was really great. And his turn at the end totally made sense. And I liked how hard it was, and that I liked that he ultimately died. Like that made sense. It didn't feel obligatory. It felt like it really mattered, and it was also a very big turning point for Ray, and that's why I think it works so well. Because I think that Armand might be the reason why, if Ray is the lawgiver, why this version would have to be different. At the very least, he would have to look at Armand as an example of like that all species have the capability to be the best examples of what is right,
Yeah.
Well, because like Armand made the ultimate sacrifice, and so did Fox. They both did. They both reflect the species' best potential.
As you said, and I feel like he'd be much closer to like the lawgiver that we see at the end of Battle for the Planet of the Apes. What would be really interesting is if in the future films we discover that he was like super chill and you should treat humans nicely, but then that the orangutans that come after him like pervert his message and
talked
twist it
about
to their...
that being a possibility. I think that would be very cool. Like even if
it would be a real life parallel to how in the real world. Jesus was very
Jesus' original message as opposed to Christianity as it became,
Yeah.
Or even worse, Catholicism.
Yeah. If we get orangutans molesting young orangutans, that might be a step too far.
Right. Anyway.
Perhaps not unreal.
Yeah. If that last story from the Forbidden Zone is to be believed for the subtle implications. No, there's no subtle implications in that. Anyway, so I've only got a few more characters on here, so we can knock out. The rest of the Southern base staff. I really liked all that. I liked the idea of a nuclear reactor being used because again, that makes sense as long as it didn't melt down, obviously.
Right.
But if that would have happened, there would be no apes.
I think there's even a moment where they mentioned that. That thing could totally explode in any minute and we'd all die.
Well, the apes have no idea what it is, and Felice doesn't really understand it either, because at one point she's like, sometimes they have to put on suits in order to walk around, you know?
Yeah, well, she's super young.
She's not as young as you would think she is. She's supposed to be like 12, which is not how she came off to me. She came off like 5. Let's talk about her.
Because she can shoot real good.
That's the thing. She's good with guns, and she drives for a time. Not well, but she does drive. It's a little bit like Robin Williams in Jumanji, but she does it.
It reminded me of Short Round.
Yeah, Short Round again. Robin Williams from Jumanji. Any number of those. But what did you think of her? Did you like her, or were you indifferent to her?
I mean, I thought she was just fine. I didn't really have a strong reaction to her either way.
I probably liked her. I listened to the audiobook and there was a voice to go along with the dialogue, so it just kind of grated on me more. But she definitely, she grated on me a lot.
That thing where her father figure made her correct herself whenever she would start to
that got very annoying. I'm like, this is the apocalypse. It wasn't endearing in any way. It didn't really say anything about her character.
Well, it was believable when he was around, but then she does it to herself when he's not around. And I'm like, I don't buy that. A kid would not do that. A kid would relish the opportunity. And the person who's willing to stop cussing is not around.
Right.
Just say fuck this shit. And
if they are that uptight, that would be like a character flaw.
Yeah, and I wasn't too annoyed by that reading the book, but I can imagine that with the performance, that was probably
it certainly grated on me after a while. But like you said earlier, she kind of drops out at a certain point. She does what she has to do. She's almost like a slightly more developed version of that guy who drives Blue Eyes and Rocket on the boat for a little bit and then abandons them.
Oh, yeah, true. And then Blue Eyes had to drive the boat, which was just wonderful to visualize.
Yeah, that was a great boat. I almost said that was a great boat. I meant to say that was a great bit.
It's a fantastic boat. I'm like, wow, you really had a great mental image going on.
I was listening to that audiobook, making ice cream, just riveted by the images of boats I saw in my head.
I mean, I could buy it. You an island, a long island, as it were.
Riveted by boats passing me.
I'm not around boats enough in my day-to-day life to really have had a good, strong mental picture.
Anyway, so yeah, that is actually all of the characters that I have written down. So I believe we can go to closing thoughts. So, what do you have to conclude us on, D?
Let's think a second and make sure you didn't forget anybody. No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I was pretty thorough, and I checked. I even checked the wiki page.
The wiki page.
The wiki page. Ooh. Yeah. So we were pretty comprehensive here. But
there are other characters in the book that just don't have enough of a part to play in the story to bear mentioning. You know.
I mean, we could like Gray's mate who takes over the role of Queen from fucking Cornelia. And then there's that great bit where she stands up to Red and is like, I'm listening to Shut the Fuck Up, Red, where Red tries to like enforce her role as Queen. I thought that was great. Because it just shows how shoddy the whole coup d'etat is, you know?
Yeah, it's a pretty poor coup d'etat.
And I think that's one thing that really... So all in all, I just think...
To be fair, they're apes. They don't have a lot of experience with coup d'etats. But,
yeah, Koba's was also bad. It was better than this one, though. Way better.
It was more dramatic. It was higher.
He actually shot Caesar and didn't rely on some other guy to do it. In a way, Red and Gray's plan was probably cleverer, but again, Koba's just had more moxie.
Well, he actually faked burning down the village and saying that the humans did it. What he did was essentially just lie and tell the other gorillas that people who were still alive were dead.
That's the thing. The
And then,
approach they took with the females was very unintelligent. Like, especially Cornelia. Like, they just try to murder her, and then they just hope that everybody else will go along with them. It's fucking ridiculous. And also, when they try to say that, like, some of the Gorilla Guard betrayed them, that was their other big mistake.
do you know if there was a gorilla in this named Ajax?
Yes, there was also a gorilla in this named Ursus.
Yes, who dies off.
Which is unfortunate. I mean, there could be a million gorillas named Ursus in this universe. I'm not saying like that was the Ursus, but that was a nice reference.
It was certainly a Ursus.
Indeed. But yeah, Ajax was from the TV show.
Was he?
I think so. Oh no, Ajax is also a cleaning product.
Oh, you know what I was thinking of?
What?
Ajax might not actually be anything.
He might be Deadpool's bad guy.
Well, he's a cleaning product, definitely.
Yes.
But also, I think in my mind I read Ajax and was thinking of Apex from
I think I thought the same thing. Yeah.
Tales from the Forbidden Zone.
I think that's what I was thinking of as well, which is another good story from that book.
It is another good story from that book.
Most
that's
of the
great
stories
book.
from that book are good, as is this book. So, like I said, closing thoughts. I think that this book accomplishes a whole bunch of goals. The biggest and most important one is that it's just a good, solid story that takes this world that I was already interested in and makes it even more interesting. And I think there is nothing more you can ask from an expanded universe prequel movie tie-in book. And this is probably the best I've seen of those. It's better than any of the Star Wars ones I've read that directly tie into one of the movies. Those are usually the weaker ones in my experience. The better Star Wars novels are the ones that are standalone and then they're doing their own thing. This does both, and I think that's why it's so effective. Is it does its own thing while also setting up, enhancing what happened in the last movie and the next one. It's. I think brilliant is not a word that would be overstating anything here. Bravo, Greg Keyes.
It is pretty good. I'm really growing to like you, Greg Keyes. We'll see how Firestorm turns out, but I really liked this, and I really liked Stone Monkey. This was better than Stone Monkey, though.
This book, you think this book was better than Stone Monkey?
Yeah.
In what? Yeah, I think because it's such a good expansion of the movie universe, and it expands things about it that we didn't know, that we didn't already know.
Stone Monkey is a really fun original story in this universe. This just has the advantage of centering around characters that I already had a connection to.
Well, because of the detail we get is impactful. Because Stone Monkey takes place on the other side of the world. It feels so far away from the ape stuff we're familiar with.
Yeah.
But that was the cool thing about that story, and maybe that's why this is so good. He told that story that was removed and unique and different, and then this is very classic Planet of the Apes.
What Stone Monkey did best is also what this book does best, I think, and that is excellent world building.
Mm-hmm.
Which was a lot of what was
absolutely.
Which was
but
a lot
this
of what
book
was good
is
about
yeah. But again, they're also good standalone stories on their own that are journeys for characters outside of just being like this grandiose like tapestry building for the Apes world. I think that's what is at the core of the franchise's best entries, and this reflects that more than many of them do. And I think that this is that's the key. Greg Keyes.
Yes, let's get more Apes books. I almost said Hollywood, not Hollywood. Wherever the fuck these things are written.
Well, I mean, they're produced by a Hollywood studio. I mean, Fox puts them out.
Yeah, Fox. Let's greenlight some more books.
Mm-hmm.
You guys used to run Star Wars. You know what?
They do. So we're gonna read Firestorm. We'll see how that is. We'll talk about that in a few weeks. But hopefully they'll put out some more books that we can talk about in the future. They've put out novelizations of all of the movie and all of the TV show, but there's really no reason to review those because we've talked about all the movies, and we are planning on doing commentaries on the TV episodes at some point. So
yeah, I would like to pick up those omnibuses at some point, just
at least
just
for
to
the
read.
collection. Yeah.
just to read those novelizations
That
and
too.
see if they. I'd like to know if they differ at all from the movies.
Yeah, they probably do. The one for Battle is probably drastically better than the movie. Conquest probably too. Not drastically, but still probably better.
I would think, because through prose they could accomplish a sense of scale that those later movies struggled with
Right.
because of their poor budgets.
But even just more accuracy to Paul Dane's original vision, because they'd have to be based strictly on the script, but written while the movies were in production. So
Probably.
that's better, because they wouldn't have been influenced by Fox going, you have to change this and you have to change that. They didn't give a fuck about the novelizations back then. You know, they could have put all the blood in it that they wanted. Because realistically, adults are probably the only ones reading those anyway.
Kids watch these movies. We're trying to be the Star Wars. That doesn't come out for another 10 years. Shut up.
I love the executives at Fox that yell at people in this short but very pouty voice. It's great. Anyway, so that's our review for War for the Planet of the Apes. We hope you enjoyed. And if you've read the book, we'd like to definitely give your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't, definitely go ahead and give it a read. I think we indicated at the beginning, but if you still aren't sold, you should fucking go do it. It's great. So yeah. Next week, D, we're going to be continuing in an ongoing trend that we have kept going for quite some time. What is that trend, D?
We're going to continue Bill's education on the X-Men films. Next time, we're doing First Class.
One that I haven't seen.
Which is generally considered one of the better ones.